You are watching the Dark Fantastic Network.
In Red, a Tale by Ahmed Khalifa.
One. Gary opened his eyes. A quiet, empty street. A blue-black night. He swallowed. His throat was dry, his eyes wet. He looked up at the sky. Clear. But no moon in sight. He turned to his left, his right. The city. A suburb. Ahead was faint light coming from a main street. Downtown. He raised his left wrist to check the time. His watch was gone. Shit, he said, his voice strong and clear despite his thirst. He started walking. Houses to his left and right. Some dark, some flickering with the hesitant light of old TV sets. No sounds, though. Not a laugh or a whisper. Not a shout or a cry. He stopped walking, looked down. He tapped his foot. Not a sound. He felt his heart race. Fear taking over. He tapped his other foot, harder. Nothing. He raised his head, looked around, panic swelling within him. No sounds. Silence. Absolute. He staggered, raised his hands to his ears, pulled at his ear lobes, shook his head. But still he couldn't hear a thing. He turned around, screamed. Help. It was stupid, of course. No one would help a middle-aged man in a rumpled gray suit, standing there in the middle of the street, not knowing where he was. Crazy, they'd say. A meth head. Blind drunk, they'd say. Yet, he screamed again. Help. A movement, from the corner of his eye. He turned. By a streetlight, a silhouette. Someone, looking straight at him. Gary swallowed. He wanted to ask the man for help. Was it even a man? It could be a woman. No, Gary thought. The posture, the hat. And was that a suit? No, it was a man. He was sure of it. But he hesitated. Something about the way the man stood. So still, just out of reach of the light. It made Gary uneasy. Then again, beggars can't be choosers, and he needed help, badly. He didn't know where he was. What time it was. Then he remembered something. He searched his jacket pockets. He sighed. All empty. So he didn't know where he was or what time it was, and he was broke. Great, he thought. I need help. Now. He started towards the waiting man. The man didn't move. Hey. Sorry to bother you, but I think I'm lost. The man lifted a hand, bringing it closer to his face. Gary couldn't see what he was doing. Scratching his nose. Wiping his mouth. What street is this? Gary said. The streetlight went out. Gary stopped moving. He couldn't see the man anymore. The darkness had swallowed him whole. Then, a sound, sudden and strange. Tap, scratch, tap. The man emerged out of the black, and into view. He was holding a cane in his right hand, dragging it behind him. It was the source of the sound. Gary laughed. He could hear. Oh God Almighty. He could hear again. Then he saw the man's face. 2. The face seemed eerily familiar to Gary, but not in a comforting way. It wasn't connected to any heart-warming childhood memories. It was a face out of a half-forgotten dark dream, a fleeting image from a past best buried. Something about a boy, 7th grade, taunting Gary, grabbing his crotch, squeezing, pushing Gary down, placing a knee on his stomach, hurting him. Hi, there, the man said. His voice was smooth, friendly. Instinctively, Gary took a step back, away from the man and the dark memory he brought back with him. The man stopped moving, brows furrowed. What is it? He said, are you all right? Gary noticed the man's dark brown coat for the first time. It looked old, out of date. Gary swallowed again, his saliva going down a bit more smoothly this time. Yes, I was just. You're lost, the man said, sounding like he was certain of the fact. How long had he been standing there, watching Gary, waiting? Yes, I don't seem to know where I am exactly. If you could just. But the man raised his hand, cutting Gary off. No need to explain. I know the way. The way. The way to where? Out of here. Where is here, exactly? The man raised his cane, let it hang before him like an arrow, its tip pointed at Gary. Gary felt something radiating from the man, something violent. But a second later, the man brought the cane down, slowly, letting its tip touch the ground, without a sound. "What's your name?" the man said, not a trace of menace in his voice. "Gary." As soon as the word was out of his mouth, Gary regretted saying it. He didn't really trust this man, didn't really want to tell him anything about himself. But the name just seemed to blurt out of him, unheeded. The man took another step forward. "Well, Gary, you can call me Ismail." The man looked up, down, around, at the dark, silent houses. Then he smiled, revealing perfect teeth. "So, where are we?" Gary said. Ismail's smile slowly dissolved, leaving no trace behind it. Smiling or not, the face didn't seem to change. Like a rubber mask that always reverted back to its original design. "You really don't remember anything," Ismail said. Gary shook his head, suddenly feeling ashamed. Feeling more than lost. Feeling like he never belonged anywhere. Like he was being swallowed by something huge, a leviathan. It was a terrible sensation. Like falling forever. He looked away, tried to hide his fear. "Don't trouble yourself, Gary. I'll help you." A hand squeezed Gary's arm. He was startled. The man was right in front of him, smiling again. He smelled of mothballs and Bengay cream. "Let's get away from here. It's so quiet." He gently pushed Gary forward, and Gary found that he had no choice but to go along with this stranger. For now. This time, as they walked, Gary could hear the sound of their footsteps. The tapping of Ismail's cane as it touched the ground. Then, a soft breeze, and with it, a new sound. A distant melody. A prickling at the back of his neck. Gary turned, and thought he saw someone there, behind them, following. The blink of an eye and the shape was gone. Gary turned around again, looked ahead. That feeling again, of being followed. He turned around. A light, from far away, at the end of the street. Out of focus. A dot of red light, coming closer, closer. Ismail raised his cane, rested it on his left shoulder. Then he said, "Let me tell you a story." 3. A few hours ago, you came into a bar. A small place, cozy, noisy. The clientele on the rowdy side. It was your first time there, you see. I guess you were looking for some excitement, something new. Anyway, you came in, took a seat at the bar, ordered a beer, and waited for something to happen. But, for a while, nothing did. A, shall we say, friend, took a seat beside you. A rough man, with rough hands and rough habits. His name was Rennie. He was a regular. He said he came for the blues blaring out of the ancient jukebox. But we knew better. What he really came for was blood and pain. The blues was just gravy. That night, he had his eyes on you. I don't know why. It might have been your face, your look of innocence. It might have been that you were new to the place. Or maybe he recognized you from somewhere. Or you him. Anyway, that night, he decided that you, Gary, were it. So, he waited for Howlin' Wolf to start screaming, then he started working on you, calling you so and so, taunting you, making fun of the size of this, the color of that. At first, you thought he was crazy. At first, you didn't know what to do. You're not a violent man. You're not a man for confrontations, I know. But there was no way to turn. The crowd was looking at you, waiting for you to make your move. Most of them, deadbeats and haters, wanted a little blood spilled. But, the truth of it was, you were scared, like any sane man would have been. You were in a strange place, surrounded by a bloodthirsty mob, and a big, crazy guy wanted a piece of you. So you did the smart thing and started walking away. And that's when he killed you. 4. Gary stopped walking. What did you say? Ismail just looked ahead, a hint of a smile on his strange face. Gary looked at him, trying to make sense of all of this. Then he felt it again, at the back of his neck. A touch of heat. He turned around. The red dot was closer, but still far away, like a beacon in a night sea. Ismail turned, looked at the light. So you see it. Good. What is it? Gary said. It's him. He wants you back. Him who? The man who killed you. 5. Gary slowly turned around, faced Ismail. It's true. You're dead. Gary felt something inside him burst open, unleashing a mixture of fear and rage that he'd never experienced before. It was like fire, pain, and pleasure all mixed together. He grabbed the lapels of Ismail's coat, the fraying wool rasping against the skin of his hands. "Who are you?" Ismail raised his head. An instant later he was a few steps away from Gary. Gary looked at his empty hands, his mind trying to process what was happening. Ismail just stood there, his back to Gary. "What do you want?" Gary shouted. "Rennie, the man who killed you, has anger issues. And, as I said, he had his eyes on you. He wanted you and he took you. It was that simple." "What are you talking about?" Gary said, his body shaking with rage. Ismail turned, facing him. "When you tried to walk away, he grabbed you from behind, beat you to a pulp, and left you there, dead." Gary shook his head, trying to push the images away. But, slowly, it started to come back. The man coming his way, exuding violence, evil. And Gary standing there, afraid, knowing he couldn't take that man, that bully. Not in a million years. Suddenly, a memory, unwelcome, of him as a child, on the floor, a beefy boy on top of him, laughing, holding Gary down. Then, pain, the feel of his broken body, the sound of the cheering crowd. At the bar, in the classroom, it was all coming together, overlapping. Then, everything fading away, as he bled. "Look around you. What do you see? What do you feel?" Ismail said, and even without seeing his face, Gary could sense the smile in the man's voice. "We are nowhere. And you are waiting." Gary turned to his right. The red dot was almost upon him. Waiting for what? For the next step. Gary went to him. "What's the next step?" The red light touched the side of Ismail's face. He closed his eyes, seeming to enjoy its feel against his skin. "Release." 6. Gary could feel the warmth radiating from the red dot. It was a comforting sensation. "You feel it. Just let yourself go, just a little bit," Ismail said, slowly opening his eyes again. The sensation of warmth started at the middle of Gary's body. It was like drinking a glass of fine brandy, with the warmth, golden and welcome, spreading outward from the middle of his chest, relaxing his muscles, fixing his mood. Gary closed his eyes. Remembered. "Death is a hard truth, Gary. I know." Gary opened his eyes. "Where are we?" he said. "Neither here nor there. That light, it's an opening, a path to the next step. A way out, or a way in." Gary thought. The red dot grew bigger. Into a circle, a gateway. "You want me to go?" Ismail shook his head solemnly. "I don't want anything. I'm just doing what I have to." Behind the light, Gary could see something. No. Someone, moving. "Who's there?" "It's him. Your killer." Gary took a step away from the light. "What does he want?" "He wants to stop you. He doesn't want you to go." Gary clenched his fists. "He knows. Even in death he doesn't want you to rest." Gary turned to Ismail. "No." The red light touched Gary's face, and now he could hear music, the blues. A harmonica. It sounded like something by Little Walter. "No," Gary said, softly. He put his hands inside his jacket pockets, grasping for something, anything, but there was nothing there. The light dimmed, darkened. "Be careful," Ismail said, tense. "No," Gary said again, louder this time. "You don't understand," Ismail urged. "Yes, I do." Gary grabbed the rim of the red circle with both hands. It was warm, malleable. And he pulled, tearing the gateway apart. The music stopped. Then the light was gone. "I know what I have to do." 7. Gary grabbed the cane out of Ismail's hand. Ismail stood there, his face mask-like. Gary raised his leg, brought the cane down, breaking it in two. He threw the pieces away, the wood hitting the ground with a sharp, echoing sound. "I'm not dead, and this is just a bad neighborhood, a forgotten part of the city, nothing more." Gary looked around him, pointed at the houses. "These are just empty houses. And this is just an abandoned street." He started walking towards Ismail, who stood in place, unmoving. I don't know who you are or what you want. But you're a liar. I didn't die. That man, Rennie, gave me the beating of my life, but he didn't kill me. He walked away before he could finish the job." And then, Ismail smiled. "And then." But Gary couldn't remember the rest. It was there, at the edge of memory, but out of his reach. For now. I don't know. But I'm not dead, and this is just a street. Ismail moved towards him. Gary pushed him back. Then a sound. A sweet melody, a harmonica, coming from afar. Gary turned to his left. The red dot, it was coming back. The truth is brutal, I know, Ismail said, grinning. No, Gary shouted. The sound of footsteps. Behind the light, a figure, walking towards them. No, Gary said, softly. The red dot grew and grew. It was now a vortex, almost upon them. And the music filled the air. You lie, Gary said, then grabbed Ismail and pushed him towards the light. Ismail shouted something that Gary couldn't hear, grabbed the edges of the vortex, fighting against its pull. What's on the other side? Gary shouted as the music rose and rose. Ismail looked at him, a hint of fear in his eyes. Just you wait, Ismail said, as the light swallowed him whole. The vortex grew smaller, and the red light dimmed, disappeared. The music started to fade. The sound of the harmonica only a distant echo now. That tune. It made him feel like a kid. It made him feel like crying. It reminded him of footsteps coming his way. Gary took a step forward, tried to see who it was. A silhouette. A man. Maybe Rennie. Coming closer, slowly. I ain't running, Gary thought. Let him come. A quick look at the houses on both sides of the street. A shadow. A movement behind one of the windows. Or maybe I'm just imagining things, Gary thought. He took a deep breath. He was ready. As ready as he was ever going to be. He put his hand inside his jacket pocket. And this time, he found something.
You've been listening to In Red, a Tale by Ahmed Khalifa. For more videos like this, please subscribe to the Dark Fantastic Network.
Death is a man in black, and he has gone insane, slaughtering the innocent. Only X, an amnesiac who wakes up to find his wife dead beside him, can stop him. Now, X, along with a band of heroes hunting the man in black, have to embark on a terrifying journey through the cursed town of Crofton, and into a haunted house filled with secrets, to find the only thing that can stop death. From A. Kmeel, the #1 best-selling author of Bad Dreams. Coffin X, a terrifying novel of dark fantasy and horror. Now available on Amazon.